Let's get it started.
Double O.
Think like a rapper.
What up, world? This is Think Like a Rapper, the podcast, back with your boy Double O, and we have a returning champion today. He is what I often consider the one of the real innovators of digital video content in the hip-hop space for people that maybe felt like they were not being catered to. I'm sure he has a very diverse and very large age group, but I think for a generation that he is from, his content is extremely necessary and allowed for what I think is a lot of the digital content that's come with rappers becoming podcast runners and just a lot of these YouTube video commenting guys. His name is Justin Hunte. He is the company man, and he is here to let us know how the hell we can make money in 2020 on digital media, because he's been doing it for a minute. No, that's always my personal thing. But thank you for being back on.
Oh man, thanks for having me again, man. This is dope, man. I appreciate the intro.
No problem. No, I do. I mean, when we talked about it in the first podcast, and if anybody wants to check that out, just go to thinklikeaRapper.com, and you can go. I think he's in the second or third episode of the original incarnation of this. But you really saw a hole and saw what the transition from the blog space to the next social media iterative space would be, and we're able to kind of make that leap before a lot of people did. And I think that it's extremely important that we, celebrate that and also follow your lead, because you clearly know what's going on and trying to figure out what happens sort of next.
Yeah, I think, I talked to a lot of students, and I was talking to a student yesterday, and he asked my advice as a journalist, and he was trying to figure out how to spend most of his time and he wanted to know how I looked at the space. I've been saying this out in the ether on social media since the beginning of this year, but I've been thinking about this for a while. And I think two things are going to happen. One, whoever can break a really important story, meaningful story in some capacity through a meme will be a god. And because that's the only thing that we're missing for memes, right? Memes, Elon Musk, I happened to say this the other day. He said, "He who controls the memes rules the world." And so far, we've been able to get a whole lot of entertainment. Freddie Gibbs is memeing up academics right now, so they work in rap battles.
I definitely want to talk about that a little bit.
And they're great for games, right? Yeah. You can only pick 3 all-stars. Which 3? They're great for that. Whoever can figure out, because I spend so much of my time trying to figure this out, whoever can break an important story through a meme will be a god for the rest of the digital space, because I don't know how much smaller you can get than a picture, right? And on the other end of it, I think you're going to see, monetizations evolve again, because we're in COVID. People have had stay-at-home orders for however long. One thing that we have noticed is that music streaming itself hasn't gone up. There was an expectation that people have more time in their hands, they would listen to more stuff, so music streaming would go up. And I think what COVID revealed, or at least solidified, was the fact that people listen to music at work and in the car. And so if you don't have to go to an office space and you don't have to drive as much, that's going to cut into music streaming. So at the same time, we see this proliferation of DJs on IG Live or Versus battles or whatever. And the monetization isn't filtered in for the label and the artists that are playing even 90 seconds of a song. I think that's going to come. And they're going to have to do that to just solidify the balance sheet so that we keep some sort of necessity on a record label. And they already do it on YouTube, and YouTube tends to lead the way on most things. So I think that that balance will happen over time. And until that happens, no matter if you're an artist, a journalist, or anything, you need to be as visual as possible.
Yeah, I mean,
you need to be seen right now.
Let's break that up into a little, because there's a bunch of things I want to talk to you about. But let's go straight to streaming. Um, do you think that it's simply the streaming numbers being flat or down was because for years we've been promoting that streaming music is no longer this thing that you intimately listen to in your room by yourself when you're just like listening to a CD of something and getting lost in it, but it's something that gets tagged on to other things that you do. So I'm going to work out. Here's my playlist for working out. I'm going to go to work. Here's my commuter thing. I need to listen to just beats in the background because I'm typing up some, doing some data entry work. Do you think that it's the fault of the streaming services and sort of this false connection that the music industry sold, that now, even though music has been at the forefront of media because of all this proliferation of new media, it's now something that has to be attached to something else? Or do you think that the way in which people the type of music that was being created up until the pandemic happened rang less true once you were stuck in the house all day? Like, how much were you going to turn up to club records when you weren't in the club? And those were some of the, obviously, like when you think about like Rap Caviar and some of the records that you hear on there, some of the biggest records are very turn up, The Box, right? Started the year off as like the biggest record of the year. But yeah, once you're just sitting at home and you got a stay at home order, like how many times can you actually listen to, to Roddy Ricch The Box?
I like that song.
No, it's not.
I'm joking with you. Because that's the thing that's so funny to me about media. As soon as you sound remotely critical of something, all of a sudden you're a hater. I get it. It's art, and everybody's, sensitive about their creations, and I think that's, an honorable place to be perfectly honest. But I think that what more than I personally think that more than the type of music that tends to be most popular, I think pop is just going to be the most popular. I think that the way we categorize a lot of music is misnomered, right? Yeah. We say pop for the white type songs, and even no matter how popular black songs get, they never seem to get the same pop tag, when I think a lot of them really should. Take Drake, for example. He released a project during stay-at-home orders, and he's king number one. And I think he got to 2 or 4 at his highest. Right now, he's at 8, I think. But which is a big dip if you consider that, right? If you're usually number one regardless of what you release for at least a couple of weeks on streaming platforms, right? And now, but you don't have a music that's necessarily even touches on certain kind of topics, and you can see it. He's still one of the top selling artists. I say this as a compliment, like he's still one of the top selling artists, but you can see that there's a softness there in his market in certain environments. I think these environments tend to be such outliers that I'm sure most companies don't even plan or strategize for them. Yeah. Now they might have to, because we're in a new world. We don't know what post-COVID is really going to look like. I think my biggest takeaway, more so than, how much partying are really people doing? Because I feel like there's a lot of house parties, and I feel like a lot of places in the South never closed, so there's certain places where I think, people are partying. But what this has shown me more than anything else is how you can have a number one song on any platform or all platforms or on any chart, and people don't even notice it. Like, it doesn't even cut into the ether. Like, this is the first time when you have a number one song and you don't hear it anywhere. So it's hard for the industry to hype itself up, or for artists to hype themselves up for their success, than it is for a song to actually make an impact on the population. Take Trolls, for example, with Nicki Minaj and 6ix9ine.
Haven't heard it.
I just heard it 3 days ago. Right.
You were like, I got to go listen to this just because?
No, look, I don't spend a lot of my time. I generally know Nicki Minaj's music. I generally know 6ix9ine's music. I know all the things that created their continued buzz in their audience. And just for personal things that I've been working on or professional things I've been working on, I haven't had a chance to really go explore it. Right?
Yeah.
But this song is so huge, I never hear it. Most people I talk to, and a lot of people in the industry, only heard it once, if that. And we're not in those places where we can get that osmosis feeling for, oh, this is what the streets are talking about. This is what the DJs are spinning. You know, that song, once Nicki got added to that song, that's when the radio jumped up, their media base jumped up. I saw them at 4th most added one week, which is a lot for 6ix9ine. And so, you know, there's clearly DJs spinning it, but I didn't feel the weight of that. And the weight of it, I felt without it being about the song, which is something that happens a while. And I thought maybe this is in a vacuum, but Lil Baby was way up there. And he had a protest song that did incredibly well in the charts. Yeah. And, you know, so there's people that are streaming it a whole lot, but you don't feel the weight of it. You know, there's what rock band came back and got a #1 last week? I can't even think about it. You don't feel the same way without having society around it. And I think that, to me, shows the softness of the overall music industry model. Okay, you're basically having an inside baseball #1 that is very difficult to make an impact in the real world.
But, you know,
and maybe it doesn't matter as much as these.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that, though, part of, I think, this recognition of the larger human toll, right, that this whole thing is taken, which is like, all of these things happen, the way in which we interact, it's so necessary that it is socially intertwined. And when you pull that out of the equation, like you said, you know, there are songs that the first time I would have heard them, if I didn't actively have to play them to DJ, might be at like an H&M or like, you know, Urban Outfitters, or at the bar with someone else playing them. And now you don't get those experiences. But I do find it interesting is that music hasn't gone away, right? People are still playing music. There's a ton of DJs that are digital, you know, that are coming online, learning OBS and figuring out how to stream live.
Yeah.
But what they're choosing to play is very different. You know, they're playing the biggest DJs that are being sort of touted and talked about right now, and some of the biggest guys that are, you know, that are scaling really quickly on places like Twitch or even Instagram Live, and Versus, it's a nostalgia, it's a familiarity play. It is not and it's a slightly older one, you know, which I find interesting, because you know, the argument could also be made, can always be made, that the internet is supposed to be, and hip hop and urban music in general is this, you know, the domain of youth. But now all of a sudden you have, when it comes to brass tacks and when it comes to music, the music itself is right now being dictated by an older generation. You know, I mean, you 100% have millions of people watching 6ix9ine go live on IG, but that is much more of a meme generation, right? Much more of a, it's not connected to the music in the same way. And I do find that interesting, that the music that you have, think about some of the things that, you know, I haven't seen many people talk about that, and I'd love to get your take on this, but, you know, some of these records that were released because of the quarantine, right? Like the Usher and Little John and Ludacris record Sex Beat, or the T-Pain and Chris Brown record. You have these things that were sitting around that then were discovered on Versus. And it's just like, oh, you gotta put this thing out. Like, you gotta do this deal really quickly. And watching those things sort of innovate, yeah, it's been interesting, because I do think that what it feels like right now is no one's paying attention to new stuff coming around and coming out, right? But we're swimming in the classics, you know, and this need for, and I'm wondering if it's because everything is so different that you can literally not pay attention to you can't take in any new information because the whole world is too new to even process. Yeah. But you can take that hour, 2 hours, 3 hours to just swim in nostalgia, you know, and I wonder if that's a little piece of it.
I think that's definitely a piece of it. I think I also look at the freedom that these DJs have on their own platforms versus when they're at work, right? I'm not sure if the DJs, I don't listen to the radio very often, so I can't call that. But I know when you watch D-Nice's live, is D-Nice. You know, if you're watching Boy Wonder's live, it's Boy Wonder, whoever's live, whatever they're doing. And they have more control for what it is that they're selecting to play. And I think that you're seeing some of that deviation take place for a number of reasons. And I think probably largely because where the world is right now, you know, like, you know, the joints that they're playing are, one thing that's so interesting is that you can see the light switch in hip hop, right? Or in modern music culture, right? You can see what happened post 1995 FCC Act. And you can see how mainstream big box media prioritized one thing, and the underground the internet found its home on the internet, championing a broader range and across all genres, right? Yeah. And so it's hard. It can be hard to find. Before that light switch happened, you could have a hit that was also a social song. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like you could play, you know, My Mind's Playing Tricks on Me. You could play, you know, Dear Mama in a different sense, or, you know, whatever. I mean, maybe I'm not giving the best examples, but you had a number of songs. You could play Coolio song from Gangsta's Paradise or something like that, right? There, you had hits that were also socially conscious more often than you do now. Like every now and again, you get like a Logic and his song, the Telephone Number song. Yeah. Right. But so that means you could play nostalgic songs that are hits and are saying something at the same time a lot easier than you could do now from the hit side of it. There's still a lot of cats who have B-sides that are, you know, talking about all kinds of things going on in the world. But those aren't necessarily the ones that end up making it super high on the charts.
Yeah, like Jadakiss Y is a nostalgic hit that you can, you know, that you can go to now that can get played in verses, but you can't find that of it really except for like Kendrick All Right or something like that of the last, like damn near the last decade. That's going to be something that's really going to be both.
Yeah, I mean, even a song like Swimming Pools Drank stood out because, you know, it's an anti-drinking song. Yeah. Right. Let's take Lupe, right? Every time I hear any Me Too anything pop up, the first thing I think about is Bitch Bad. Yeah. You know what I mean? That was one of the strongest songs off of, was that Food Liquor 2, I think it was. Mm-hmm. That speaks to that moment, to that situation, you know? And a lot of those songs didn't get the same commercial love, commercial reception, you know, for whatever reasons, for any reason. So if you're DJing and you want to keep a mass audience, but you have more freedom than you know you have, and we're all a part of this culture, so we tend to lean on the responsibility that we have as non-culture vultures or non-profiteers, and you have to marry that in the middle. Well, you end up being more nostalgic because you get the message off, and you get feed people's, you know, need for hits.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting time for music. I mean, having been a part of a song that just got released, you know, a couple weeks ago, Donna's Black Boy,
crazy too. I love that song.
Yeah,
it's super dope.
From the first time I heard the first iteration of it, I was like, oh, okay. Like I know it erased every record we were doing before, you know, like the records we had been working on before were, and this, you know, the thing about it that's interesting is that was made in probably December. And so it has no immediate ties to kind of like what's going on right now. But the terrible thing about it is I've been a part of that now twice with Nikki Jean, Hands Up. We made that record in, let's say, February of that year before Mike Brown was killed. Oh, wow. So the chant, all these things are attached to sort of this idea. And it just, you know, it goes to show sometimes that you can make those songs and it's fucked up, but basically you can just wait until it's relevant. You know, like you're just like, it's going to be ready soon. And,
It's
and
so
you know,
terrible. That's
and
so true.
yeah, so but there is this, this very weird vacuum. And it was something that I spoke with Janae Bolden about at Bassett, how quickly they have become and shifted and become this, you know, every publicist, every single marketing person is like, hey, I know you want to post this. I know you want to post this. I mean, I'm sure your Facebook feed and your Instagram feed are just riddled now with ads. I've never seen so many sort of like independent rap ads and things like that than I've seen, you know, over the last couple months. And yeah, figuring out a way to connect is the hardest thing to sort of do right now. And yeah, and I think because of that, it's just very easy to just rely on the trust of nostalgia a little bit. But Freddie Gibbs still is able to come through and make these records that are still very impactful and still move around. But I think he's figured out how to master this new era, especially now with his
Yeah, I mean,
trying to annihilate academics.
well, here's the thing that's, I think, the Freddie Gibbs case studies screams loudest to me is that he never went away. Freddie Gibbs got dropped in 06 and never stopped putting out music, never stopped putting out mixtapes. It's hard to find a year that Freddie Gibbs didn't drop something. And he is super visible. He's any place you ever want to see in LA. He works with all kinds of people. He travels around and he talks to his audience, right? I mean, that is a pretty basic playbook, right? You just hang around and you talk to people forever. And no matter what you're doing, they're going to show up and support you. You know what I mean? Like you look at Alfredo Bandana. I love the Currency project, the project he did with Currency the year before Fetty. I think the Freddie, he had a Fetty album. And the Freddie album was like this weird experimental cool thing. And then, you know, you get back to two projects in between that in 2014, you have Pinata. So that's a pretty tight run, all things considered, right? Yeah. And so you keep putting out music tighter and tighter every time. Your cosigns are going up. He did deals with Empire, did deals with RCA. I think this next one or last one, I can't remember, is coming out, either came out of Warner, if I'm not mistaken. So he's tapping into everybody's PR people, expanding his audience that way, you know, at that point in time. And he stayed focused on being a better artist and a better rapper. That to me is the most consistent way to success.
Freddie was already being talked about, and it was already signed the first meeting that Kids in the Hall ever had. Our first A&R meeting was with 3H.
Oh, yeah.
And at the time,
Joe 3H.
Yep. And at the time, Archie, who is Freddie's part of Freddie's team now, manager, I'm pretty sure, was interning for 3H. And yeah, it was like 3H was like, man, this guy, Gary, Indiana, Freddie Gibbs, is about to be, because I don't know if you've ever interacted with 3H, but he's a baby Jimmy Iovine. Like he can sell you on anything. And at that time, you know, he was the person who had brought Kanye to, he brought 50 and Kanye both to Capitol within a year, basically. And Capitol passed on both of them. And then they go to be 03 and 04, I guess, whatever the biggest stars. And so it was just like, oh, he's got the golden ear. And and Freddie was one of those first guys that he signed. Yeah, Freddie's an interesting thing. I mean, I've watched it anecdotally. One of my close high school friends, and I don't know if it's like that with you, but with a lot of my high school friends, I always looked at the era that was happening, especially like my era, the blog era going into like 2010s. It's like stuff that they may or may not like, but they wouldn't really connect with in any real way. It would just be kind of like, oh yeah, I'm still listening to Nas and Jay and State Property and whatever else, that they would kind of leave what they loved about music kind of in that era. And I remember taking my homies to a show, and Freddie was the headliner, and they just immediately off the show just was like, I fuck with that dude. And I think he's been able to straddle that. And when he really figured out Freddie, what you talked about, but really figuring out when he came back from that stuff that happened in Europe, and the first thing he did was all the promo for the Freddie album. When you cannot take yourself super seriously, but you have this rep of being this really legitimate sort of, Gangster Gibbs, I think it's just always going to be even more endearing,
Yeah.
And I think it connected him to a new audience in a very interesting way. And then just fucking consistency of quality product just makes it, he's undeniable, And so it's funny now that your boy in journalistic media arms, academics, is falling apart trying to
I mean, look, you could
diss him, but
you could call that either way. I'm not sure he's falling apart, but
I think he is. Have you watched any of the streams?
I mean, have you watched his old streams? Like he's good. He's good for a drunk moment going in on a lot of different stuff.
Like to not just go in on Freddie, but now you're cursing out John Legend and Chrissy Teigen, and you're like talking crazy about Ben Baller, and but he's creating his own memes for then Freddie to just,
Well, I mean, what's that do? I mean, I don't think the cancel culture is so funny to me for two reasons. One, everyone gets so mad at everybody wanting to cancel somebody. And they seem to get more upset if someone gets fired for being whatever than they are about somebody being whatever and people not liking it. It's not hard to be rude. So, but not hard to not be rude. I don't know if you can cancel academics because he is completely self-made, and I think people can get blackballed, but, academics can still move the needle just by talking about what other people are doing on their IG Live. His audience likes him. And then, so how would you, let's run a hypothetical case study on how to cancel academics or anybody, right?
You'd do it the way that they did Milo Yiannopoulos, right?
Milo didn't own his own platform.
Very true. But you can shut if the platforms decided, if they decided to deplatform him, right, for whatever reason. Not that it would happen, but if you were to take out, all of a sudden you can't catch him on Complex Network anymore. And then all of a sudden his Twitter gets shut down because he said some wild shit. Like it comes out that Bad Baby tweet that he said was hacked was legit, right? So then they just ban him. It's gonna be, sure, he'll be able to kind of like move along. He's not gonna go from zero to broke, but the way in which he interacts with the larger media space changes drastically. And I think that in that way, you may not be able to actually just cancel someone, but you feel like you can dampen it enough where people just pay even less and even less and even less attention. And then it's just like, there's going to be those diehards. There's going to be those people who are just in the mix. But academics is in the space now where Adam is live, or like he's got so many sons, right? He's created this wave of all these sort of like hip hop gossip, talking behind B-roll video channels. Any of them could catch a wave on the algorithm, and all of a sudden he's not really popping on YouTube like that either. And then it's just then he's just on Twitch in a way that's, So I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, I think the only way, I don't see him getting deplatformed. What is everybody gonna snitch to Google? Oh man, he's to Google demonetize him. Maybe. I think that he's still gonna get some artists are still gonna DM him on the side.
100%.
Give him information. So if you want to cut that out, you'd have to have a bunch of artists DM him wrong information at the same time about stuff. So you'd have to lose somebody's credibility that way. I think Complex is actually, to me, might be in jeopardy. I have no knowledge of this at all, but if I'm John Legend and this dude on Everyday Struggle is talking about my wife that way, I might have to go to Kanye and Kid Cudi, which has created the whole platform, basically. Like all of their cool points are tied directly into those two guys, and be like, not sure I'm going to be talking to you guys or interacting with a publication as you continue to fund and pay for someone who's disrespecting a good music family
Yeah,
in a very blunt way. I could see that going away. But then all of a sudden, I could see him going to 6ix9ine and being like, yo, you know, I need you to hit up Complex, so we're not talking to them anymore. 6ix9ine is a big, big draw right now. You know what I mean? And so, I mean, their biggest, probably most successful podcast is about 6ix9ine.
Do you think that lasts?
No, it never lasts. But I think that his, not from a music standpoint, but I think his brand will always be there, 100%. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know.
I mean, look at 50 Cent. Nobody cares about 50 songs. True. I mean, but 50's not a pedophile. At least
but 50 is also talented in the musically inclined way. Like, say what you want about. Let's be real. Like, 6ix9ine songs are not gonna truly last unless they're these hits written by somebody else and he happens to be able to really pull off. Like, he is just the meme. He's the Donald Trump of rap right now, and there's a segment of let's be real, there's a segment of the hip hop fan base, unfortunately, that is probably voted for Trump, is as they're so countercultural. That's what attracted them to hip hop, that they're now even countercultural to hip hop. Sure. And want to want to keep this narrative of being so they're anti everything, even the thing that they supposedly love. And so I think that's what keeps him around right now.
I think music is subjective, so I can't say how good someone is versus someone else in two different eras. I think that the music he makes fills a void that's not commercially viable anyplace else. If I want to hear something that sounds like Onyx, he's really the only guy for me to go to. You know, not to say he's the only one, but he's, the only one on the charts that's like that. So I think that's advantageous for him. I think the universe, the world that he's built around him, which has been so important for Lupe, right? Creating the whole Food and Liquor series, the idea of the Law and Change with, being the water rebirth being similar to Michael Young history, all that stuff added to the lore for his fans. The same thing with MF Doom right behind me. Mm-hmm. That all that lore that came behind that. I'm an original. Bone Thugs and Harmony was my first favorite group of all time. They had all that. 6ix9ine has that. If you look at all of his songs, the tracks, the name of his songs is keyed in on an audience. If you look at, the pattern of his IG lives, a lot of them do take a XXXTentacion kind of, inspiration in terms of how he mixes up the crazy stuff with the, more substantive stuff to his people. As a as a face or as a representation of anything, he looks like someone who keeps overcoming. Right now, whether or not, that makes it easier to look past some of his obvious shortcomings as a human being. A lot of times that draws people in. So I'm not so sure that he would lose anything. I think he could probably stop making music and still have a pretty big hold on his base. Now, he might lose his cover, he might lose his label. Those people might not rock with him. But what does blackballing really look like for academics or 6ix9ine when they're able to, they create their thing on their own?
Yeah, they can circumvent. They can circumvent the spaces because they are the platform, and the platform hopefully goes with them. But that is, if there is anything positive that happens in the conversations about them, that is probably the strongest thing, right? That is the word for everybody to know that that's the only way to future-proof yourself. I think that that's a really important takeaway from both of them. For better or worse, you build that thing that is a direct conversation between you and a fan base, and you know that as well. And you stand for something. That's the other thing too. I think that there's a stance that they don't pussyfoot around whatever the subject is. They're either on the right side of it or they're on the wrong side of it. And you're going to find fans on either side. You're going to find people who agree with you on either side. And once that stance is solidified, I think it is we are media especially is in such, and this even goes back to, to make a little jump, but this goes back to what Dave Chappelle was talking about in the 846 special, which is like, you guys are here because you trust me, right? I think even if people are saying some dumb shit, but they're so they are so staunch in their stance on that you're going to get people that agree with that, even if and it may be in this time much more necessary to be very solid in your opinions and suffer whatever wrath happens. But at the same time, you're also going to have, because of scale, because of the way that the world is now, you're going to be able to also find a bunch of people that agree with what you believe in. I think we've seen that happen in the much larger media space, and we can, like we can jump to Dave Chappelle, we can jump to this whole thing, but there's, I don't know how much you know about like the intellectual dark web and like the world of like Jordan Peterson and the Brett and Eric Weinstein, but just even like, these were people that they felt like they needed to push back against something that was happening. They didn't find themselves really being very right wing in any other way other than it's like, no, I don't believe in this very specific thing. But by doing that, it galvanizes this whole base of people who also agreed. They just didn't realize that they also believe in all this other fuck shit. But then they're getting adopted by the larger sort of right-wing media space. And now they have a huge fan base that they can then sort of run with. And then it doesn't matter what they kind of say, because as long as as they speak with conviction, it's gonna find its audience. And I think sometimes that's basically what we're experiencing in hip hop with these people. Sometimes it doesn't benefit you to sort of like play the industry politics, when you're speaking to a fan base.
You definitely don't need the industry to tell you how to talk to your people. Yeah. I would definitely say that. I look at Kanye West, right? I think Kanye West is another great case study, right? Here's someone who has managed to piss off every population of people, period, except for the LGBTQ community. I think that's the only one that's left. He's got black people. If he did,
I thought he figured out a way to piss them off like a little while ago, because of somebody.
Because of Trump, probably supporting Trump, maybe.
Yeah, somebody else that he had endorsed, was like found to be obviously very anti-LGBTQ, and so,
that whole side.
Yeah. But anyway,
like, okay, let's say we pissed him off too, right? He came out in the beginning, was getting mad at rappers, pissed off the rappers for saying that it's crazy to be homophobic. Yeah. He pissed off the Republicans at first with the George Bush stuff, and then by pissed off all white people by snatching the microphone from Taylor Swift. You know what I'm saying? He took straight shots at all the corporations for about 8 years while he's trying to get Yeezus together. And then he takes shots at black people and pisses them off. So what's happened is every time he needs to expand his audience, his reach, or get in rooms he's not in, by pissing off a population, you galvanize another population in your favor. Now he's pissed off all of them. So now he's known everywhere, and he's the richest rapper on the planet. Now I'm saying all that without the part about him just being world all-time talented in general.
Of course.
I'm not saying 6ix9ine has that, but I think that you can, if you could keep the attention, if you could keep a product or a mission or a code that you have as consistent as possible, you always have the option to just piss off your own fans. But you have to do it by aligning with what is perceived to be the opposite, right? You can't just piss off your fans and say, I don't fuck with them either. You got to piss off your fans by saying, you know what, I've been thinking, slavery was a choice.
Yeah, you have to be the consummate contrarian in order to really continue to be able to do that, because otherwise it could be seen as some flip-flops, right? Like you said this, but then this happened. But I've
about that?
never felt any way about his journey, because I look at it as that. I've always looked at it as like he's on his life trajectory, and his life journey is his own, right? And
Mhm.
I think that sometimes people just really lack the empathy to understand that he's been like, sure, celebrity is a thing that people imagine as some sort of like Iron Man suit. But if you break down the things that have happened in his life and happened in his life publicly, whether it be relationships falling apart, dissolving, um, parents passing away, wife gets kidnapped and robbed, um, having to be institutionalized even for a temporary amount of time, like this is heavy stuff, right? And everybody's going to have their own journey, but I think that like you can't always, especially for somebody like him, he loves to, Kanye is like a walking startup, right? Like so many startups, and if you really get into their world, they're always talking about like it's about MVP, man. You just get out there, it's minimal viable product, you release that into the world, then you iterate on it, and blah blah blah, A round, B round funding, yada yada yada. And he's always been that, right? Like he's always been the person that, I have this idea and I have this thought, and what is the fastest, strongest way to get this thing out, get it to the people, and we'll iterate on it later, right? Like it might change, it might get better, it might get worse, or it might whatever, but we're doing this on the fly. Uh, and so I've just looked at it as just like he's gonna figure it out. And then 2 years from now, 3 years from now, when there's a bit of distance, from the red hat and all of that, like people may be like, oh, okay, whatever. It he was he needed to get to this point, or he needed to get to this point. I mean, it's something I've seen you obviously tweeting about the last two songs that have come out this week, from him. But at least I'd love your take on it, but what I sense is even this is an iteration of what happened on the last project, right? Because even this is like, oh, okay. So now you can take what you learned from Yeezus, and now you can take what you kind of, when you were trying to figure out how am I going to rap in the way that I'm still Kanye, but about these subjects now that are very important to me. And I feel like this is like the first offering that is figuring out a way to do that. Is it going to be the best offering? I don't think so. But I think finding like that's just always been his sort of thing. And again, for young artists and entrepreneurs and people in general, sometimes everyone is so afraid to put the product into the world because they're just afraid of whatever is going to happen, that it's not ready yet, it's not good enough, it's not, you know, you don't have the gall or whatever to do it. Like when you see what happens, you also know that like if it's great, people are going to really care. If it's not, it'll be forgotten about in a very short amount of time anyway. And you can put the next thing out and the next thing out and the next thing out. And like we often talk about off camera, which is like putting in these reps and building this consistency and ability to get products into the space. And I think with all of this stuff that we've been talking about over the last, 20 minutes is like, those are always the positive things to take from it. And everyone should almost always be looking at it as that. And if it's not a learning experience in that way, then you don't even need to be spending time to worry about how somebody else is living their life and how somebody else is making sort of decisions, because it doesn't really affect you if you don't want to.
I never worry about cover or do stories on who anybody's smacking bellies with. I don't care.
Yeah.
And I think there is a lot to learn from that, from Kanye's process. I mean, I think that's a great way to describe it. I've never thought about it that way, but him always being in startup mode, I think that's actually really good advice to pass along to any artist. Like, look at every project like you're in startup mode, and because a lot of people have trouble completing things. I know I do. I mean, especially when I'm off a rhythm, right? For me, it's very difficult to start writing great fast again if I haven't written in a while, right? And so whenever I'm in a corporate environment, my creativity slows down and a lot of times stops. It's one of the reasons why I had to leave the bank in the first place to really do this, because it would take too long to do things. So it's another reason why when I was running DX, I really wasn't writing that much. I was doing a lot of video stuff, but I wasn't writing every day on the site because my role wasn't that.
Yeah.
You know, my role was the management side, the talent scouting side, the business development side, like a lot of administrative managerial type stuff. And so my pen was slowing down there. But then my best rhythm ever happened immediately after, or after I left the bank. Best rhythm ever all the way up until I got the DX gig over those 3 years. And then my best rhythm ever after I left DX, all the way up until I joined Empire, right? And Empire was just like, it's not their fault. It was not a product of any of these organizations. It's just how my mind tends to work. Because if I'm in these organizations or if I'm in new environments, I put myself there for the learning part of it, and I need to be as present as possible. And so a lot of times I haven't digested whatever it is that's happening. And for someone like me who sells perspective, I'm only as valuable as what I know. So the hard part is that when I get out of those corporate experiences, a lot of times it takes it takes reps to get things back in, or I have to create a whole new supply chain. Right, that's one of the things I'm doing now. Is I'm having all these different conversations with people about different topics, and that sparks new ideas. And then I just do news on myself on what these people said in these conversations. And now there's so many of those things out there that my mind is working, and I can connect all these different conversations and make a breakdown. You know what I mean? And now the breakdowns are written, so each of those is a piece that can go in on social. So now, you step and repeat. And now there's more attention on it, so then I can focus on the tastemaker side of things, which is, which songs I like or something like that.
You've talked about this period as of refresh in a way. And so to tag it to that sort of connection, I know that you've taken a bit of a break last year. How has this time been in terms of of writing, in terms of creating more digital products, and how you looked at it and how you approached it once everything slowed down?
Struggle. It's been a struggle the whole time. But I had a plan, and it did not work. It was not working. So my plan was just to jump back in and start doing TBDs, which is the breakdowns, which is a product that most of my audience wants most often. Yeah. Like they want to break down every day. They want 15 minutes on ranking stuff, behind the scenes stuff, history stuff, social stuff. They want it every day. And I just finished writing, because I started freelancing again. I'm freelancing for Revolt. And I just spent the longest 3 days trying to write 18, two lists of 9 that shouldn't have taken that long. It was just, I felt like I was writing for the first time. So my plan was to focus on social media first, right? Get my ideas out there as fast as possible. Focus on Twitter, like not all social media, focus on something on social media, right? Yeah. So I focus on Twitter, because Twitter's the hardest. It's hardest to get engagement. It's hardest to get retweets. It's hardest to get into their ecosystem, and it's the hardest to get new followers. And so I went over there and I started engaging with the people. Anybody who engaged with me, I had real conversations with them. You know what I mean? I'm really following the trending topics, but I'm also paying attention to my timeline in a different way. So that put me in tune with what's happening in the world. Yeah. Right. I could tell you stuff that's happening in soccer. I don't care about soccer, but I know Messi just got his 700th goal. You know what I mean? I know Mario Botelli, may or may not have put out a big post about everybody going back to Africa and starting African clubs that the whole world reacted to, except for America. I can tell you about all kinds of stuff I don't really, never had an interest before, but that was just to get into the news cycle. And from there, I was like, okay, I can start writing breakdowns now. They're taking forever. Like, I'm literally not liking anything that I'm doing. And so I said, okay, well, I will now pivot and just start, one thing that people have been asking me for is a podcast. And I've never focused on that because you could take all the breakdowns that I've done, take the audio, and they're 10-minute bite-sized podcasts. Like I could make that pivot easily. But what I needed most was new information. I needed new perspectives, right? I needed to be able to connect what's happening with other people, what other people are seeing, with the experience and all the things I just learned over the 2 years I was with Empire. And so, so I just started calling people on the phone, not even recording them, just calling people on the phone and doing FaceTimes and just having long talks with people. And then I decided I was going to start doing that with and recording them, you know, and around that time, that's when, and in the background, this is true too, in the background, because I definitely need to get my channel active. I experimented with a couple of new ideas. I'll bring back some of those. I'll discard others. And I also have a big backlog of stuff from the All Out show and Rude Jude that I never put up. So I just started putting up old stuff or interviews that I've done before that I never put out. This, like, literally, a lot of times I record stuff just to have stuff for later. Like, you know, and so now I'm just throwing up just different stuff. So, you know, the YouTube algorithm is checking for me again in a different kind of way. So I was just throwing up old stuff, like 2 or 3 old videos a week. While I focused on new conversations. The George Floyd things happened. You know, Immortal Technique's been a friend of mine for a long time. So he's the first person I called. I'm like, Ben, do you want to talk to people and let them know what's up? And he did in a very emphatic way. And I liked it. So then I called another friend of mine named Awkward. He's a rapper from the East Coast. He was an independent artist who, he released a song, I can't think of what it's called right now. I feel so bad. But he released a song with Sean Price, a couple other cats, 10 years ago on my first radio show. And that's how we met. And so he's been fighting fascism. He's been fighting police brutality not exclusively, but consistently on the side, writing editorial pieces as a journalist on, you know, things like what happened to the guy who filmed the Eric Gardner choking. It's just all kinds of really great work. So I was like, let's just talk about that, you know? So then we had that conversation. And then around this time, I'm starting to think, man, Black people, we need to reclaim this American flag, man. And I'm like, we need to get our Dipset on. So I reached out to Jim Jones because I want to talk about that. I want to talk about Dipset's iconology. I want to talk about, you know, where those decisions came from. I want to talk about how much heat they caught when they released Diplomatic Immunity. And Jewel says, I worship the late great. No, he said, I worship the late prophet, the great Muhammad Atta, who flew the planes into World Trade. Remind me when I was dealing Kane, something like that. And that was a big thing. Like, you know, they almost got, you know, they had to change the lyrics before the album came out. We're doing interviews around it. And, you know, to me, I think that was the best example of what I think about when I think about what it means to be American, you know, having so much pride in a place that you want to make it inclusive for everyone and make it better. And that was an example of what they were doing. And I feel like we need to do that now. We're doing all the other things, but we still separate ourselves from the strongest symbol that connects with the most people. And, you know, to me, that's really important. So I started just having conversations, and off of that, I would just do news off myself. And now those ideas are flowing for the breakdown. So the first one will be back this week. But
amazing. You had to listen for a while to get those.
And essentially I had to do the same thing, right? I mean, it's, you know, what's Killer Mike saying? Plot, plan, strategize, organize, mobilize, right? So I had to do that, right? You know, like everyone else, we had to make adjustments. Yeah. But one thing that's been great, if there is an upside to COVID-19, is that people are more accessible than ever. And so, you know, you can get a lot more help, a lot longer, more substantial conversations with people just in general. And that is
one thing I hope stays. I know it won't, but there's one of the things I wish would stay for a, you know, post all of this, is that people have been very open and active and engaging in their sort of digital relationships, because that is that's the opportunities that you have, and nicer in general. And you just hope that stays. It won't, but you know, like you know, it would be awesome if it did, at least for a little bit longer. Because even with this podcast, same thing. It's been really easy to just be a little bit more looser with, like, hey, you know, are you available to do this? Because a lot of people even didn't want to do things that weren't on that were digital before. But once you take away the options, this is what they got. And they, I feel like everybody's like, I'm just going to be home anyway. Or,
Yeah. But to me, it's better to me though. Like one thing I'm, not enjoying as much now is verses. I liked it better when it was just two people on IG talking junk, playing joints at their house. Now everything's looked so produced. I'm watching John Legend and Alicia Keys, and it's beautiful. It looks like it's Grammy ready, but that's not what I like about verses. I'm watching Fab and Jada. Cool. I think there's a lot of memeable moments, but that's not what I liked it when it was Babyface throwing shade and Teddy Riley couldn't get the band together. I like those moments.
I just happened to be with one of the partners of Versus this past weekend. And we were talking about that a little bit and talking about the kind of like, what I was telling him is what I think was amazing about Versus is you got this, look into very rich people and huge people's houses, right? But then you also got this connection of like, oh, their internet's terrible too. Or they're like, they don't know how to even use this stuff. Like they don't, I think the joy of Verses in the beginning was a peek into, it's partially about the celebration, but it's also a little bit of like a peek into the life and lifestyle of that person. Cause you're getting like, oh, they chose to put themselves in that part of the house and like, or, oh, they, how prepared really were they? Or damn, I feel like, I don't know. I really liked when they first did it in Jamaica, where they put them, Beanie and Bounty together. I feel like the Alicia one was, and John one was also sort of interesting. I didn't get a chance to see the Fab and Jada one, but I've seen all the memes. I think it's still serving the same sort of purpose, but it doesn't feel as much must see viewing like it was the first couple times, and that is, I don't know if that's because of what people feel like they, who they want to see, right? Like who the next big people are. Because maybe it's one of those things. The great thing is they're testing this shit out just like we all are, right? Like they don't know what's going to work and what's not going to work.
Well, I don't know. The thing you had a conversation with them. I don't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, no worries.
But I think about the first Verses with Just Blaze and Swizz back during, I think it was BET Week or Grammy Week a couple of years back.
Yeah.
To me, that one worked because they were both DJs. You had to literally be there. Like almost nobody was actually there recording it at all. It was on IG Live, just people in the room. I think Hot 97, ended up being the one to post it. They ended up putting out the official video. But two DJs in a room works to me in a different way than two rappers who got to wait for someone to cue up a song going back to back to back. Because there was still that element of, hip hop and competition that was coming from the people who were playing the songs. And you didn't know what was going to come next, right? And so that to me is what this still could be. I'm not saying that this new model doesn't work in the same way, because the original ones that went so hype had none of these, things that came, at the beginning of COVID, and still got so much attention, largely because of, the hip hop presence in the room, the community cultural presence of what it felt like, and the fact that there was such an emphasis on playing new music. I guess there was an emphasis on new music, but at the end, you could see how that made the huge difference when Swizz dropped the Bath Salt song. It's the Bath Salt song, there was, it's just one of those unpredictable moments, right? I think they can find that, but, also, I understand their challenges, right? You can't just have two people on IG. The platform's too big now. It's on iTunes now. It's on
Yeah.
Spotify. It's going live everywhere. So you have to have people in the same place. And I think they'll figure it out. But that's one of those things. Like sometimes it's just more interesting when it's rugged and raw.
Yeah.
Hold on real quick. You mind if I run to the restroom real fast?
Yeah, do your thing.
Just pause. I'll be right back.
Yeah.
Hold on a second. We sent one text. 4 p.m. PST, if that works for you. Sorry, that's works for you. Sorry, I had to respond to that. I haven't responded to that yet.
Okay. So yeah, what I love about what you were saying, and what I do think has been a through line, and I wish I would have said this when I was talking to him the other day, was that I think the DJ is the crucial element of it. I think that what the think that the entire quarantine has revealed how crucial and has brought the DJ back into importance in a very real way. But as it relates to Versus specifically, every person that has won, in my opinion, has won because they approached it like a DJ and not like a person just sort of playing songs, right? You had when they're, and it's more apparent when the other person is not a DJ, right? Like Erykah Badu, yeah, she might have won anyway. People will argue that, but I feel like she really like crushed well because she knew exactly how to really drop these records in a very important way. Ludacris, when it came to Nelly, it's just like he approached this from the DJ space. He knew exactly kind of where to come from. So I do agree with you. I think that there is something to that, because the core of Versus is basically still the Jamaican sound clash, right? And you want to have the two sound systems verse each other. And I think that is what will make it work extremely well, in the future. And maybe that is kind of like the component that needs to be blended back into it, is coming from this space of like two different sound systems. But I have loved that. I have loved that the DJ has been the saving grace in all these different ways of the quarantine. And I know I saw you post it, and I actually was talking to Mick about this before, just seeing kind of his Forbes article and how he's entering into the private Zoom party space. And then obviously you have D Nights doing what he's doing, and then also being able to scale up with merch. What's happening with Versus, which is essentially sound clashes. And it's been amazing to see the DJ get thrown back into the forefront of where they, I'm going to argue where it should have always been. And also not be connected to the BS that had become a little bit of the live music industry, of DJs having to be forced to DJ for VIP tables. And I do wonder what's going to happen now that everybody's been brought online. What happens when you do go back to the club? What are people going to want to hear when they go back to the club? Like, is it going to be are 90s parties and early 2000s parties about to be the places where people just want to be? Or is it going to be like, oh, okay, Roddy or Lil Baby or the Baby, whoever just dropped a new record on Friday, and I need to hear that Saturday night?
I think it'll be fun to see how people who built a physical brand, people who book shows, etc., how they react. I think a lot of the events in the event space, a lot of that is built off of the brand of the people throwing the event a lot of times. Or the brand of the club on what nights with what DJ. So I think people will be excited to go outside and experience what will now, I guess, be a new sense of nostalgia, right? And so, I'm pretty sure it'll go back pretty seamlessly. I'm not sure how popular it'll be. I think that psychologically being in a room closed off in the dark with people sweating and drinking and going outside and smoking weed and coughing, I'm not sure how attractive, but I know kids in Alabama are having COVID parties right now. So, you know,
Oh
maybe they're
yeah,
fearless.
they just got arrested for that though. Yeah.
In Alabama, that's a big shout out to Alabama. I didn't think Alabama had it in them.
People are crazy, man. I I can't. Yeah, I don't even know. I don't even know. I don't want to keep you too long though. What I never got to ask you before that I get to ask you again in this time, maybe even let's specify it to right now. Um, what have you 2020? What have you learned from hip hop that you use in your everyday life?
Really good question. I've never thought about that. What have I learned in hip hop that I use in my everyday life? As a reminder from 2020 or because of 2020? I'll say this. The resilience of it all. You know, how it innovates. You know, the first people to figure out how to have a good time without being able to go outside was hip hop.
Yeah.
D Nice jumped. He got like 2 million followers just going live the first night. He'd been doing that forever. You know, people are like, "Oh, D Nice spinning? Oh, let's tell the whole world D Nice is spinning. Everybody's at home." That was amazing to me, and seeing even businesses that are starting through this. You know, Versus one of them to me is a great example of that. How hip hop pivoted to care and talk about real world issues. You know, I think there was a lot more than that than we make it seem sometimes. You know, I was watching this No Name J. Cole back and forth, and there is this impression that, oh, the rappers ain't showing up to say nothing. Actually, they kind of are. There's a ton of songs. Jim Jones about to release the second version of The People this week. You know, The People was his joint last time, and now he's got Conway the Machine on the remix. It's like, it's amazing. You know, I think that, and I don't look at that as something that's opportunistic, because it's hard to be opportunistic around something that's embedded in your work all the time.
Also, what are you supposed to do? I mean, I think the people, and this is sometimes the beef I have with the younger generation, and not to, you know, specify sort of no name in this, but there's like artists, their most important role oftentimes is in being able to observe, analyze, speak truth to power in these really important ways. And if they need to kind of show up and be a part of things, especially from a visibility standpoint, if they have it, in order to shed light on organizations and on the people doing the important groundwork. But they aren't necessarily meant to do the important groundwork. There are people that are there all the time that are not going to be worried about when studio time is and when, you know, what time sound check is, that are going to be doing the important, extremely important work that happens every day on a local level. And I don't like this idea that these two things have to, you know, once you make enough money, you're supposed to conflate those two things together. You know, that's not always the purpose. That is rarely ever the purpose of art, right? People like to look back at, you know, Marvin Gaye, what's going on. Nobody was like, yo, Marvin, what you doing, yo? You know, well, you got what's going on, but, you know, where are you at? Are you in the streets? It's like, no, you weren't, because you knew that there were people that were doing real work that you were connected to, that were locally doing those things. And then you had a person who could observe and see what they had doing and turned it into a larger sort of conversation. And you hope that that song maybe inspires another generation who isn't as connected because they can't go outside in the same way to continue the work. And it's all part of the continuum. And it's weird that we keep trying to, I don't like this weird, this space that we're in of like this purity challenge sort of space where like you have to do all these things, or you have to speak for all of these different marginalized groups, or else. I think that people's motivations, everybody's self-centered in a certain way. Everybody's motivations are always coming from the space and world that they know, and it slowly expands as you get older and you meet more people and meet different kinds of people and all of that. But if you're doing the work, if you're doing good work, if you're trying to affect change even in a very small familial level, and that's all we're supposed to be doing, man. I don't know. The larger argument between those two to me was rang a little false and very much of ego on both sides.
I don't know. I think that whether or not people choose to be public figures, they are public figures, right?
Of course.
Whether someone chooses to be a leader, or not, they are. And I think that I tend to look the other way. I tend to think that we give people in political positions too much credit. Like, these people in Congress aren't anybody special. There's some random guy who owns a fast food chain and got a whole bunch of homies to support him. You know what
100%.
I mean? Like, and so, we tend to look at, oh, shut up and dribble. Oh, well, he's just a rapper. What do we need him to say? Well, rappers mobilize people all the time. They have a direct connection to a community, their community, who follows and listens to their messages. That's literally the whole. That's the whole game. So, like, use the genre of music with the most words, and get as many people to rock with your brand. And so, if you have a reluctance to that, or see that as somehow less important, interesting than a political leader, that is what is more frustrating to me than anything else.
Yeah, but there are people, I don't mean political leaders in the
I know what you mean. You're talking
structure.
about,
I'm
well, that's
talking
the other
about
part.
real,
No, I understand what you
game
mean.
changers locally, right?
Right. But here's what I mean by that. This is why I said that. Because where did this myth come from that why do we need to fix America? You need to fix your Black communities. Why aren't you guys fixing up your own stuff? Everybody knows that stuff is always happening. There's always a fundraiser. There's always some talent show to save the community center. There's always, this stuff has never gone away. And so,
of course.
So there's an interloping, finger pointing, blame redirecting strategy where these ideas even come from. Meaning like, oh, well, our entertainers aren't talking about real stuff. There must not be anything happening in the communities. Or, people, nobody in the Black communities or impoverished communities are doing important work. That stuff happens all the time.
100%.
And so when I look at all this conversation, I think all these things get transposed together, or they get lumped in together, and we act, and a lot of times they're approached from a way that it feels like we're all talking about the same thing. They're all completely different things. And so when I hear someone say like, well, it's not really the artist's job to be doing the groundwork, I'm not even sure if that's, if that's broad enough to really encapsulate what the critique is around that artist, right? Okay, maybe they're not doing the groundwork, but people get mad when the artist doesn't talk at all, or they get mad when the artist says something they don't like, or they get mad or whatever. And so that puts the artist in a position of where they start identifying with Lil Wayne and just sitting around saying, hey man, my life matters, especially my, whatever he said. So, I agree, young men for counsel, old men for war. I agree that music is definitely the marketing arm of the social, of any social reform we want to see. But I have a disconnect with the entire conversation, because I feel like we have to look at the fact that our politicians, our political leaders, our representatives, however you want to describe them, aren't that impressive. They're less
100%.
impressive, and they have less power to mobilize than actual, artists or even people on the front lines. And we discount them, people on the front lines, by acting like they're not doing this work every day. Like this hadn't been happening in the Black community since slavery, since pre-slavery.
No, we shouldn't. We should never discount them. And that's kind of what I'm saying, is that in the best case, right, the artist's job, if they are, and I see it happen all the time, being on the road with Lupe, right? We can go into a city, and they're going to be real community leaders that are fans of his, that will connect and say, hey, this is what we're doing. This is what we're doing. Like, would love for you to do X, Y, Z, or, we're doing this thing at Howard, would love for you to come and speak. And to me, that's where the exchange and value can kind of really happen. But to be like, we need you to drop everything that you're doing now and come and join this community organization and then be the face of it or whatever, is, that's kind of where I'm looking at. We have a power vacuum. That's the issue. We have a power vacuum and we have a celebrity worship problem. And whatever side of the coin you're on, expecting anybody, especially rich, famous people, to have to do anything, is always going to be, you're always going to be let down. There's no way in which that situation doesn't happen, because what you're doing is putting an onus on somebody else to do something that you either feel like you don't have the power to do or aren't doing yourself because you aren't focused on doing it, because you're worried about you're not minding your business, as they say, but you're not tending to the shit that you're trying to actually do. What I always find is that it's a much better conversation to be like, hey, I'm doing this and I've been doing this for X amount of years, X amount of whatever over here. Can you help in this way? Mm-hmm. Right? But just this blanket sort of blame on the whole thing to me is BS, because it comes down to like I feel like, and this is some weird, and we can, we can end it here, do whatever, but like, I feel like humans always have this weird issue with demigods. Like, we need to have them. We need to have this people that are in between us and God level. And they're this weird space that we create, and we put, Beowulf there, we put Hercules there, we put Kim Kardashian there, we put, Brad Pitt there, we put all these, we always find, Muhammad Ali, the posthumously Malcolm X and Martin there. And we put these things there, we create these superhumans that it's close enough that we can aspire to try to have some sort of North Star, I guess. But then we take out all of the things that make them human and the fallibility in order to keep them up there. But when they're living, and especially in this day and age, around doing stuff, right? Like, we think about kind of like this weird dismantling that's happening now of like Michael Jordan, right? We can spend all these years now looking back and feeling a way about it. But in the moment, being like Mike might have inspired hundreds of current, if not all of the NBA right. class, right?
Right.
And it had nothing to do with whether or not he was saying anything about something or whether he was doing whatever, but it was just him focusing and doing the deep work and being the best that he was, right? Allowed for generations of people and generations of ideas and people to improve, yeah. right? Like, on who he was. Having LeBron be able to be like, okay, I'm going to be like that, but then also I'm going to add this piece in, because in this time now, we need to be able to talk about these things, right? Mm-hmm. It just, to me, that's, the symbols they are often always better as symbols, which is why we hold these things very dear when there's some distance with them, right? Like, yeah. You think about all the Marilyn Monroe fake quotes and whatever else now, but it's just like, if Marilyn Monroe was on TMZ right now, like, what? Yeah. She would have been dismantled in all these ways. Yeah, I just feel like this relationship we have with celebrity has become entirely too confusing because of the accessibility of it. And it maybe is better to just keep them as nice, pretty things on the shelf and let them figure their own shit out and do the work that they need to do ultimately.
I don't know. It's hard for me, and I know we're wrapping this up. I don't mean to keep throwing
No,
out
we're all good. You know,
different
we like to
different
talk.
perspectives, because I look at it like I think it's better to make an example out of artists. You know, not from a media point at you. You know, you're clearly on another team antagonistic standpoint. Nobody's doing that. Well, people will do that, but I'm not advocating for that. But what I mean is that, you know, there are artists who have only gotten bigger because of their ability to tap in on what's really happening. And, you know, I think that social media is a good job of bringing up old stuff. And I think sometimes that can be a good thing, right? Like if there's
Yeah.
somebody who was silent during Eric Garner, Mike Brown, Philando Castillo, all that stuff, and they're still silent now, I'm not mad at anybody bringing up anything that ever happened back then. It's like you did, so like Lil Wayne is catching hell, right? And will it have an impact on his sales? Probably not. I feel like he's done enough to where people are always going to love Wayne for one reason or another. I think you're seeing a lot of artists who piss people off do a lot more podcasts, a lot more media. I see Eminem more than I see Eminem ever right now. I've never seen Eminem be this accessible ever. You know, Lil Wayne has a whole podcast where he basically just rolls a blunt, sips some lean while he talks to whoever on a video screen. And, you know, his message will get forward and move forward through that kind of stuff. But I don't see anyone having any respect for Lil Wayne outside of just his music. You know, and I think that's great for some people, but also just seeing that happen, just like Michael Jordan or just like whoever, the downstream effects are very noticeable. And that's why I don't have a problem with having putting pressure on different types of artists in that regard, wherever it may come from. I'm not saying that every artist has to participate, even though, you know, my philosophy, my beliefs, the way I look at the world, I expect them to. I like the fact people call people out, because not necessarily trying to cancel or destroy someone's career, but to inspire someone or to show someone, you know, that it's always important to remain part of the community. There's a difference between culture and community. Culture to me is like a humble brag, you know what I mean? That's like, culture is like the emblem on your car. You know, community is more helpful. You know, community moves together and has, you know, similar values. And so that, showing that and teaching that downstream is imperative to me and personally, but also just because of my perspective. I'm not even talking about a fairness perspective. I'm talking about my perspective. So it's imperative to me. But I also think that it's the only thing necessary in order to figure out or find people that are like-minded that you do want to help make the world a better place along with.
Yeah, I guess I think while I agree with you, where I take issue, and we can use Wayne as this, is that, yeah, but Terry Crews is a perfect example right now, right? Like, we've created a world which is forcing people to say stuff that they shouldn't be saying because they haven't had the right conversations. They haven't had the growth and those hard conversations necessary to speak on it, but we're forcing people to do it because you have to say something, right? And
I don't know. I mean, people look.
well,
I,
I mean,
I don't think
no,
Terry. I
wait.
don't think Terry. I don't think Terry Crews' problem is the pressure. Terry Crews is coming out and telling black people, "Hey, guys, it's starting to look like black supremacy over here. Can you tone it down?"
Yeah,
What? Black supremacy.
He's a
Where?
wild dude. But
We live in
again,
public housing.
this, and I can admit that this 100% might be elitism on my end, right? But like, I know what it was like going to whatever an Ivy League school, 1997, and taking your first AFAMS classes, and the rage that you kind of get in that in those first 2 semesters because of everything that you're watching and everything that you're reading, and really finally being exposed to like Baldwin and talking about Marcus Garvey and watching like Sankofa and all of the conversations that happen, and then being at an Ivy League where this very visible minority is in this place, and you go through that. But then what happens by the time you get to junior, senior year? is you get tested, and tested, and you have these people who have done it already, and the professors will give you new perspectives, and you shift into other, and you get argued down, and you refine your ideas, and you get this stuff so that when you then enter into adulthood, even though there's a bunch of more learning that you have to do and unlearning, especially, you're provided with tools that allow you to do so, right? And I feel like it's really terrible that we force somebody, Wayne, for instance, not to say that what he did was right, but we're asking somebody who's been famous, who's basically like a child celebrity, right? Someone who's been famous their entire life, who didn't go through, who went through terrible things, and then all of a sudden goes through like the biggest successes in the world, right? Like he is much more like Justin Bieber than he's like somebody who was 17 in Magnolia Projects, like that was on, who had a single mom who's really in this terrible space, right? Like he is pulled from that, and the familial structure of Cash Money allows for him to then, never look back in a certain kind of way. And he might have had people around him that were like that, but I just feel like it's funny because we do two things. We still criticize Wayne for obviously the stuff that he says, but like I don't see people basically erased what Pharrell said when he was talking about the new black, right, with Oprah.
I missed that. What did he say?
Oh, you got to go and do the research. But there was a whole era before Mike Garner, right? It was of this weird, we're in this new black, right? Which is kind of like, I was watching this conversation that Cornel West had, and he was talking about, it was a Rolling Stone, Matt Taibbi had him on. And, they were talking about, I don't know why it took me this long for it to click, but they were talking about how civil rights movement, him specifically saying the civil rights movement elevated and really helped the black bourgeoisie class, ultimately. That's who it helped. So it brought the sort of talented 10th idea and expanded it to the people that could genuinely be able to immediately participate in it, and brought them now into this new space. So now you have this black middle class, this much bigger black middle class. But there's a huge swath of the population, especially the working poor and poor, that it never touched. That the benefits of it never affected. And what we're seeing now is this very interesting reckoning, because the poor across the country are now like, no, we want like we need this actual change to happen now. And so I think that rappers often got caught as being a part of that, that bourgeoisie class as well, right? And they're like, I'm good. So and I'm everybody that I employ and all the other people I'm around are black people, so we're all good now. Black people are doing well now. So this is the new black, right? Is basically a version of a black capitalist. And so when Mike Brown happened, and then subsequently like Eric Garner and everything that's happened since then, you watch this shift. It took a while for some people, but you watch this shift happen where it was like, oh, okay. And like I always laugh because like, yeah, he was talking literally about it was like the new black, which was essentially like some new capitalist idea of blackness that then, he had to put out all right. Like, luckily Kendrick rapped a whole different song than Fab did on that, and made it the protest anthem. And then it was just like always, and then he did Freedom, and like all was excused. So we also allow the loophole the other way, right? We allow people to then erase anything that they said as long as they are aligning with how we feel now.
Because we need help. I think that's pretty natural. I think the light switch to me, the reason why people were able to get it is because of COVID. Because people were just sitting around. They didn't have meetings. They weren't focused on whatever. They just threw a complete wrench in the whole supply chain of everything. I know for a fact there are two different CEOs of major record labels. There's only three, so you can probably guess. You're going to get one right if you guess, regardless, right? And so who sent an email to the head, who each sent emails to the heads of their respective urban department or rap department or whatever we called it, and was like, this is what's going on outside? They've just been killing Black people? Really? We've got to do something about this. How long has this been happening? Right? They literally had no idea. Like, they called out of like no pressure. It wasn't like the ground had swollen to the point where they were like, you got to do something about this. They were like, we got to do something now. Like, what can we do about this? You're a Black person. This is our Black division. How are we not doing something about this? Like, it just became something that achieved priority because everything slowed down. They were just sitting at home, and
because they could pay attention.
Because they could pay attention, man. That's why I call it a refresh.
Yeah, and yeah, let's end it there, because I hope that in paying attention, they do and offer tangible and real changes that people need. You know, changing it from the urban department to something else is an awesome sort of gesture, but ultimately ownership and acknowledgement of these fucked up practices, I think, is the most important thing at the end of the day. And ownership is where I think everybody needs to be thinking. I think that's been ultimately, honestly, the theme of this podcast, which has been like good or bad, good or bad, whatever side of the coin you're on, ownership of your stance, ideas, and platform is the way that we all kind of have to move forward.
Word up.
So yeah,
man,
now we're going to do yours.
Man. This is, that's